From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The mood is just jubilant. It's one of victory. People have been waiting for this all their lives. It's a dream come true for many people. It's something that people can't even believe is actually happening.
My name is Baha Amir. Today, I think, in my point of view, that Egypt is starting today. Now, today is where we are born today.
The Egyptian revolution in 18 days. What comes next? We go to Tahrir Square after the announcement of Mubarak's resignation. Now the Supreme Military Council has suspended the Constitution and Parliament until elections are held. How will the pro-democracy movement shape Egypt's future? We'll speak with Sharif Abdel Quddus and Isander El-Mani in Cairo and Mona El-Gabashi here, who has spent years following the social movements of her country, Egypt. Then in this rolling rebellion, who's next? We'll go to the streets of Yemen, where thousands of people are marching. All that and more.
What we want is to demand the rights of all people and overthrow the regime. The president must leave, just like Hosni Mubarak and the Tunisian president.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Egyptian military has imposed martial law and suspended the constitution following Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak's resignation Friday after nearly 3 decades in power. Millions of Egyptians erupted in joy after learning the Mubarak regime had fallen following 18 days of street protests led by Egypt's youth.
It's not only today. The celebration has been going on for almost 19 days now, that people are celebrating the love for the country and wanting to change and wanting to become a better country, wanting to be looked to from the rest of the world as a respected place. We are young people and we can make a change, and this is what we proved in this place, in Tahrir Square.
Egypt's military council says it plans to rule the country until democratic elections can be held. Parliament was dissolved on Sunday, but Mubarak's cabinet will stay on. The military has vowed to rewrite Egypt's constitution within 10 days, but many questions remain over the military's role. Reuters reports the military will issue a ruling today banning meetings by labor unions, effectively forbidding strikes. While protesters celebrated the fall of Mubarak, many criticized the army's decision not to immediately lift emergency law.
Our demands. Number 1, put an end to the emergency law and achieving public freedom. 2, initiation of a coexistent government to fix the constitution. The interim government has to take the following steps: put corrupt people on trial, freeze their assets, and start up factories and ministries. 3, dissolving both the People's Assembly and the upper house of Parliament.
We'll have more on Egypt after headlines. The popular uprisings in Egypt and Tunisia are continuing to inspire protests across the region. In the Gulf nation of Bahrain, at least 14 protesters have been hurt after police used tear gas and rubber bullets on a crowd of demonstrators earlier today. The protesters were demanding the release of 450 jailed political activists and the dismantling of the state security forces. In a move to quell a populist uprising, the Bahraini king recently ordered the payment of nearly $2,700 to every family. Bahrain is the home of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, making it a key strategic ally for the United States. The Yemeni government has been accused of violently suppressing anti-government protesters over the past 3 days. According to Human Rights Watch, security forces used electroshock tasers and batons against the demonstrators. In addition, hundreds of pro-government supporters armed with knives, sticks, and assault rifles attacked a peaceful gathering Friday. Protesters in Yemen are calling for the immediate resignation of President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who has ruled the country for 3 decades. Protests have also spread to Algeria, where police arrested up to 400 demonstrators over the weekend. Earlier today, the Algerian government said it'll end 19-year-old state of emergency within days. The Iranian government has placed opposition leader Hossein Mousavi under house arrest ahead of a scheduled protest today in Tehran. There are reports that Iranian authorities have also cut the phone lines to his house and have cordoned off his house to prevent him from attending the rally. In other news from the region, Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad has dissolved his cabinet just months before the Palestinians plan to hold elections in the West Bank. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has already asked Fayyad to remain as prime minister. Meanwhile, the top Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, has resigned after a series of embarrassing leaks were published by Al Jazeera in what has become known as the Palestine Papers. In domestic news, President Obama has proposed to reduce the federal deficit by $1.1 trillion over 10 years. The plan includes calls for slashing federal assistance for the working poor and reducing aid to help the needy heat their homes. Obama's proposal also calls for cutting community development block grants by $300 million and for a 5-year spending freeze on non-security discretionary spending.
My budget freezes annual domestic spending for the next 5 years, even on programs I care deeply about, which will reduce the deficit by more than $400 billion over the next decade. This freeze will bring this type of spending to its lowest level as a share of the economy since Dwight Eisenhower was president.
Wisconsin Republican Governor Scott Walker has proposed a bill that would eliminate almost all collective bargaining rights for most public workers, as well as slash pay and cut benefits with no negotiation. Walker has also notified the state National Guard to be on alert for actions taken by unsatisfied state, county, and municipal employees. Journalist John Nichols has been writing about the governor's power grab in The Nation magazine.
It's easily the most radical assault on labor unions, particularly public labor unions, but really labor in general, that any Republican has initiated in decades. And it's caused an incredible outcry in Wisconsin. There have already been a number of major demonstrations. There are expected to be many more. But this is coming to a head quickly.
In economic news, the Treasury Department has outlined a plan to slowly dissolve Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government-sponsored programs that own or guarantee about half of all mortgages in the United States. Housing advocates say the closing of Fannie and Freddie would likely make it more expensive for borrowers to buy a home and thus restrict the availability of mortgages. In news from Italy, hundreds of thousands of women took part in rallies Sunday to show their opposition to Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, who's embroiled in an underage prostitution scandal. Protests were organized in more than 200 towns and cities throughout Italy. Last week, prosecutors filed a request to bring Berlusconi to trial, accusing him of paying for sex with a nightclub dancer when she was under 18. In news from Pakistan, a state anti-terrorism court has issued an arrest warrant for exiled former President Pervez Musharraf in connection with the 2007 assassination of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. Prosecutors have accused Musharraf of knowing about Taliban plans to kill Bhutto, but didn't pass on that information to authorities. U.S. officials have called off scheduled talks with Pakistani and Afghan officials. The U.S. did not provide specific reasons for its postponement, though the imprisonment of a U.S. embassy official in Pakistan has strained U.S.-Pakistani ties. Raymond Allen Davis has admitted to killing 2 Pakistanis he said threatened him while he was driving in Lahore last month. A third Pakistani was reportedly run over and killed by a U.S. consulate vehicle that arrived at the scene. The U.S. Embassy claims Davis, who is a former Special Forces soldier, acted in self-defense and as a diplomat is entitled to immunity. Davis's diplomatic status has been called into question. Pakistani media reports have suggested he's a CIA operative or private security contractor. In political news, Texas Republican Congressman Ron Paul has won the straw poll at the Conservative Political Action Conference, the nation's largest gathering of conservative activists. Paul edged out multimillionaire Mitt Romney, Meanwhile, the group Young Americans for Freedom announced it was expelling Paul from its National Advisory Board because of the congressman's anti-war politics. Meanwhile, a one-time aide to former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay has been sentenced to 20 months for his connection to the Jack Abramoff lobbying scandal. The aide, Michael Scanlon, was also ordered to repay $20 million to 5 Native American tribes whom he defrauded in a kickback scheme with Abramoff's lobbying firm. The president of the University of Puerto Rico has resigned following a massive student protest against fee hikes. SWAT teams and riot squads have permanently occupied the campus and banned public protest and the distribution of leaflets. Hundreds of students have been arrested, and some have reported being beaten and at times being sexually harassed or tortured. In news from Kentucky, 14 people, including the 76-year-old writer and farmer Wendell Berry, spent the weekend locked inside the Kentucky governor's office demanding an end to mountaintop coal removal mining. Wendell Berry spoke to the journalist Jeff Biggers about why he's committing civil disobedience.
Over these years, there's been one protest after another, one march on Frankfurt after another, one visit to a legislator after another. And last year we visited the governor. And all this has been without any perceptible political effect, no acknowledgement even that the problems exist. And so we're doing this simply as the next logical step. We'd exhausted all other possibilities.
That was Wendell Berry. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.